The snow kept falling. It covered the trees, the road, and the cabin tucked deep in the hills. Inside that cabin, a man named Henry Blake sat alone by a crackling fire. His hands were rough, his face was quiet. He had lived alone for a long time, and that's how he thought it would always be. But then, someone knocked on the door. It was not loud, but it was enough. Henry stood slowly and walked over. When he opened the door, wind and snow rushed in, and standing there, shivering, was a woman and 3 children. She looked tired, her clothes were wet, her eyes were full of fear, but she held her chin up. "Please," she said, her voice shaking, "we need help." Henry didn't speak. He looked at the children. One boy stood tall, trying to be brave. A little girl clung to the woman's skirt, and a small boy, no older than 5, had his face buried in her coat. Henry stepped aside. "Come in," he said. She didn't wait. She guided the children in, their boots soaked, their hands frozen. Henry closed the door behind them and moved quickly to throw more wood into the fire. "Sit," he said. "Get warm." The woman knelt by the fire, wrapping her arms around the children. "Thank you," she whispered. Henry didn't reply. He went to the kitchen corner and poured hot water into a few mugs. He didn't have much, but it was something. "Here," he said, handing the drinks out. The oldest boy took his with shaking hands. The girl smiled shyly. The little boy started to cry from the warmth against his frozen cheeks. "I'm Rachel," the woman said after a while, "and these are my kids, Caleb, Emily, and Thomas." Henry gave a small nod. "Henry," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. He didn't ask why they were out in a storm. He didn't press. That was something she appreciated. That night, Henry gave them his bed. He slept in a chair by the fire. The children curled close to their mother. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin, it was calm. The next morning the storm had slowed, but not stopped. Henry was outside chopping wood when Rachel came out with a blanket around her shoulders. "You don't have to do that for us," she said gently. "Not doing it for you," he replied, not unkindly. "Doing it for the fire." Rachel gave a tired smile. "Still, thank you." She bent down to help gather the chopped wood. Henry paused for a second, then went back to swinging the axe. They worked in silence, side by side. Inside, Caleb helped feed Henry's chickens. Emily played with buttons she found in a jar. Thomas sat on a rug, drawing in the ash with a stick. They didn't ask questions. They just breathed easier. At supper, Henry made soup with beans and carrots. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. Rachel helped stir while the kids laughed softly by the fire. "You live here alone?" Rachel asked. Henry nodded. 12 years now. She looked surprised. "Why so long?" He didn't answer right away. Sometimes quiet feels safer than people. Rachel didn't push. That night, when the children were asleep, Henry sat by the fire sharpening a knife. Rachel watched him for a while. "I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't found you," she said softly. Henry didn't look up. "You kept going, that's something." He didn't smile much, but his words were kind. 2 days passed. The storm finally broke. Rachel started talking about moving on. She had family out west, or she hoped she did. They hadn't written in a long time. "You're welcome to stay until it's safe to travel," Henry said. She nodded but didn't answer. That night, Thomas climbed into Henry's lap without asking. The man froze at first, unsure what to do. Then, slowly, he wrapped an arm around the little boy and held him close. Rachel watched from across the room, her heart full and heavy. The next morning they heard horses. Rachel's face went pale. "Someone's coming," Caleb said, peeking out the window. Henry stepped onto the porch. 3 men rode into view. One of them wore a dark coat and a cruel smile. Rachel stepped out behind Henry, her hands gripping her apron. The man looked at her and tipped his hat. "Hello, Rachel," he said. "Didn't expect to find you here." Henry glanced back. "You know him?" Rachel's voice was tight. "He's my husband, William." Henry stiffened. William dismounted slowly. "I've come to get my family." "You left us," Rachel said. "You left us with nothing." William shrugged. "I had to go. Now I'm back." Henry stood between them, arms crossed. "You're not taking them." William sneered. "Who are you? Some mountain hermit? This is my wife." Henry didn't move. "Not anymore." William's smile faded. "I'll be back tomorrow with the sheriff. I'll bring papers." Henry's jaw tightened. William turned and rode off. That night the cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Rachel sat near the fire, holding Thomas close. Caleb and Emily lay on blankets nearby, but they weren't sleeping. I don't want to go, Emily whispered. Rachel smoothed her hair. I know. Across the room, Henry sat at the table, sharpening his old hunting knife. The sound of the blade against the stone filled the space between them. Rachel looked up. What are we going to do? Henry didn't stop working. He's counting on fear. He has the law, she whispered. Henry looked into the fire. Laws don't always know what's right. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. He'll take them from me. No, Henry said, not while I'm here. She stared at him. Why would you do that?
He met her eyes. Because you and those kids walked into this cabin like a storm, and somehow it feels warmer than it ever did before. Rachel didn't speak, she just nodded. They didn't sleep much. Morning came, bright and cold. Henry was already outside, checking the cabin's locks and reinforcing the windows. He wasn't planning for a fight, but he wasn't about to roll over either. Rachel made porridge. The children were quiet, nervous, and clinging close. I want to stay here, Caleb said, eyes wide. Can we? Rachel knelt in front of him, hands on his shoulders. We'll do everything we can. By noon, the horses returned. William wasn't alone. This time, he brought a man with a badge, Sheriff Nolan, and 2 others who stood behind him like shadows. Rachel stood in the doorway, her back straight, hands trembling behind her apron. William looked smug. I've come to collect what's mine. They're not yours, Henry said, stepping out. The sheriff pulled out a paper. This here says custody's his. Henry looked at the paper, then at the sheriff. Did you see how they lived before he left them? The sheriff hesitated. Rachel stepped forward. He abandoned us, left us in the cold without food. We almost died. William laughed. She's just bitter. Henry raised his voice. Ask the town. Ask the doctor who treated Thomas when he got frostbite. Ask the shopkeeper who gave them bread on credit. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. He looked at the kids, how they clung to Rachel, how fear danced behind their eyes. You're not taking them, Henry said again. William's face twisted. You think you can stop me? Henry's voice was low but sure. I already am. Then something unexpected happened. Voices rose from the trees. Down the road came several townsfolk. Mr. Price, who ran the feed store. Mrs. Avery, who taught Sunday school. Even old Joe, who barely left his house. They stood beside Henry and Rachel. She raised those kids alone, Mrs. Avery said firmly. She kept them alive, Joe added. That man never asked a single soul if they were okay. The sheriff looked at them, then he looked at William. This paper might be legal, he said slowly, but I don't see anyone willing to help you use it. William's face turned red. You'll regret this. No, Henry said quietly, you will. With a curse, William turned and stormed back to his horse. The others followed. As they disappeared over the ridge, Rachel's knees buckled. She sank to the porch, shaking. Henry knelt beside her. They're safe, he said. For now, she whispered. He nodded. For now is enough. Tomorrow we'll worry about tomorrow. Rachel looked at him then, really looked. Something in her face softened. Thank you. Henry didn't smile, but his hand brushed against hers. You're not alone anymore. That evening the children played near the fire again. They laughed softly, as if the fear had loosened its grip. Rachel stirred soup at the stove, her eyes drifting often to where Henry sat, whittling a small bird out of pine. You're quiet again, she said gently. I'm thinking. About what? He looked at the carving. About how I used to think silence was peace, but now I think it was just empty. She walked over and sat across from him. And now? He met her eyes. Now it feels full of things I didn't know I needed. Rachel blinked fast.
They love you, you know, she whispered. He looked down. I love them too. She reached out, her hand resting lightly on his. Henry didn't move away. The next week passed slow, but kind. Snow began to melt. Patches of brown earth peeked through the white. The chickens clucked louder. The sun stayed up just a little longer. Rachel cleaned the cabin from corner to corner. Caleb helped Henry with repairs. Emily picked wildflowers when she found them. Thomas followed Henry everywhere. Can I stay forever? The boy asked one day. Henry knelt down. I'd like that. Rachel heard. Her breath caught in her chest. That night, she stood beside Henry on the porch. You gave us more than shelter, she said softly. You gave me more than quiet, he replied. The children slept peacefully that night. For the first time in a long time, so did Henry. Spring arrived slowly, like a shy guest unsure if it was welcome. The snow melted from the trees first, then the grass. Streams trickled louder through the forest, and in the little clearing where the cabin stood, life began to grow again. Henry had lived through many winters, but never one like this. This time, when the silence broke, it was not with fear, but laughter. Each morning, Caleb helped Henry carry firewood and fix loose boards. Henry showed him how to tie knots, how to swing a hammer without wasting effort. "You're a quick learner," Henry said one morning. Caleb beamed with pride. "I like helping. Feels good, doesn't it?" "Yeah," Caleb nodded. "Makes me feel strong." Henry gave a small smile. Emily spent her days in the yard, making flower crowns and playing with the chickens. She sang to them softly, her tiny voice drifting through the cabin window. Thomas followed Henry around like a shadow. Every task Henry did, Thomas tried to copy. One afternoon, Henry carved a tiny bear for him. Thomas clutched it with both hands like it was treasure. "Did you make this just for me?" he asked. Henry nodded. "I'm going to keep it forever," the boy whispered. Henry's throat tightened. Rachel kept the cabin warm and clean. She baked bread that filled the whole place with warmth. She taught Emily how to sew and read stories aloud every night. At night, she and Henry would sit near the fire, quiet but close. They didn't need to say much. One evening, Rachel broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what life could have been?" Henry turned slowly. "I used to." "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I think about what it could still be." Rachel's breath caught. The next morning, Henry woke early. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the light touch the trees. Rachel came up behind him. "You're quiet again," she said. He turned slightly. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "Whether I should ask something I've never asked before." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Henry looked at her, his voice soft. "Do you want to stay?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She looked at the children, still asleep on the quilts, then at the walls of the cabin, now filled with warmth and stories. She looked back at Henry. "Yes," she said, "if you want us to." He nodded once. "I do." She stepped closer. "Not just until summer?" "No, for good." Rachel smiled. It was small, but full of truth. Later that day, Caleb walked up to Henry while he was tending the garden. "Henry?" the boy asked. "Yeah?" "Is it okay if I call this home now?" Henry put down the spade. He looked at the boy. "It already is," he said. Caleb grinned. "Can I call you something else too?" "What's that?" Caleb shifted nervously. "Can I call you Pa?" Henry froze. He swallowed hard. Then he nodded, voice low. "I'd be proud if you did." Caleb hugged him tight. From the porch, Rachel watched them with shining eyes. That evening, after the children went to bed, Henry and Rachel sat by the fire again. "I didn't know how much I needed this," Rachel said quietly. "Me either," Henry replied. She looked at him. "We don't have much." Henry took her hand. "We have enough." She leaned her head against his shoulder. And in that quiet, simple moment, they both knew they weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. But life is never just easy. One morning, weeks later, hoofbeats echoed again down the trail. Henry knew that sound too well. It was William. This time he came alone. No sheriff, no men. Just a man with tired eyes and a fine coat now worn with travel. Rachel stood in the doorway as William stopped his horse and looked at her. "You're really not coming back?" he asked. "No," she said. William's jaw clenched. "I'm their father." "You gave them nothing," she replied. William looked past her at Henry, standing beside the children. "What's this, you playing husband now?" Henry didn't flinch. "No one's playing anything." William's voice cracked. "They're mine." "No," Henry said calmly. "They're Rachel's, and they chose me." Rachel stepped forward. "We're not afraid of you anymore." William looked at the children. Caleb stared back without blinking. Emily stood tall. Even Thomas clutched his little bear and didn't hide. William's shoulders sagged. He looked down, then back up. "Take care of them," he said, "better than I did." Then without another word he rode away. This time he didn't look back. Inside, Rachel sat at the table, her hands trembling. "He's really gone," she whispered. Henry nodded. "He knows now." Rachel looked at the children, who were laughing again. She reached across the table and took Henry's hand. "You're our home now," she said. He squeezed her hand gently. "And you're mine." The days that followed were warm and peaceful. Henry tended the garden with Caleb, Emily made daisy chains and taught them to Thomas, Rachel baked fresh bread every morning, and laughter returned like a song once forgotten. Each night they ate by the fire, and each night the cabin felt more and more like a real home. One afternoon, Caleb was fixing a fence post with Henry. "You think I'm strong enough to protect them one day?" he asked. Henry looked at him. "You already are." Caleb smiled wide and drove the nail in without help. Later, Emily ran through the yard, a little crown of flowers on her head. "Look, Mama," she called. "I made one for you too." Rachel took it, tears springing to her eyes. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Thomas spent his mornings trying to copy everything Henry did. When Henry chopped wood, Thomas lifted a stick and swung it like an axe. "Am I doing it right?" he asked. "Perfect," Henry said with a grin. That night, after the children were tucked in, Rachel and Henry sat on the porch, watching fireflies. "I used to be scared every time the sun went down," Rachel said, "like the dark would bring everything crashing back." Henry listened. "But not anymore," she continued. "Not with you, not here." Late one evening, Caleb woke up and walked into the main room. He found Henry near the fire, whittling again. "Can't sleep?" Henry asked. Caleb shrugged. "Just thinking." Henry set down the carving. "Want to talk?" The boy nodded. "I used to be scared I'd never have a real home again," Caleb said. "I was always watching the road, thinking he'd come back and take us away." Henry's jaw tightened. "But now I don't feel that anymore," Caleb said. "Now I feel safe." Henry leaned forward. "You are," he said. "You always will be." Caleb hesitated. "You're not going to leave, are you?" Henry shook his head. "No, I'm here, always." Caleb smiled and hugged him tight. "I love you, Pa." Henry's voice caught in his throat. "I love you too, son." The next day, Henry made something new, a wooden sign for the cabin. He carved it carefully, then nailed it above the door. It read, "Home." One afternoon, while the children were playing, Rachel walked out to the garden where Henry was pulling weeds. She wiped her hands on her apron, hesitated, and said, "Henry?" He looked up. "I've been thinking," she said slowly. "About what?" She stepped closer. "About how I came here with nothing, just fear and frozen hands." Henry stood. "You had something. You had them, and you had strength." She looked down, then back at him. "I have more now, because of you." Henry reached for her hand. "And I have everything because of you." Rachel swallowed hard. "I never thought I'd love again," she whispered. Henry cupped her face gently. "Neither did I." The summer sun set slowly that evening, and inside that cabin, with 3 children curled up safe in bed, Rachel and Henry sat together near the fire. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The warmth between them said it all. Autumn came early that year. The leaves turned gold and red, drifting gently across the yard. The air grew cooler, but not cold. The kind of chill that asked for sweaters and warm soup, not fear. Inside the cabin, life continued with quiet joy. Henry taught Caleb how to fish. They'd sit by the creek for hours, talking little but feeling everything. Emily learned to bake beside Rachel. Her laughter filled the kitchen. Her hands, once tiny and scared, now shaped dough with care. Thomas carved his own toys with Henry's old pocket knife. He showed them to everyone like they were treasure. "This one's for Mama," he said proudly, handing her a crooked little bird. Rachel hugged him close. "It's perfect." One evening, after supper, Rachel and Henry sat by the fire while the children played with blocks nearby. The room was filled with the smell of cinnamon bread and pine smoke. Shadows danced on the walls. Rachel looked over at Henry. "You've changed, you know," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "You smile more. You speak softer. You look like a man who has something to lose." Henry looked at her for a long moment. "I do," he said, "and I'll protect it with everything I have." Rachel reached out and took his hand. "We're not going anywhere," she promised. "Not ever." Henry gave a small smile. "Good. I was just starting to get used to the noise." They laughed together, low and real. It was the sound of something healed. That night, after the children were asleep, Henry carved something new. A heart, small and smooth, with each of their names etched into the wood. He placed it on the mantel above the fire. Rachel stood beside him, staring at the carving. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Henry looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth. "It's us." Later, When the fire had burned low and the house was still, Caleb tiptoed out from the sleeping room. He found Henry sitting in his usual chair, sipping tea. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. Henry nodded. "Always." Caleb stepped closer, holding something behind his back. Then he pulled it forward, a small, messy drawing of the cabin, the creek, and 5 stick figures. He pointed at each one. "That's me, Emily, and Thomas. That's Mama, and that's you." Henry smiled. "I made it at the table this morning," Caleb said, "but I wanted to wait till now to give it to you." Henry took the paper carefully, holding it like glass. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. "It's the best thing I've ever been given." Caleb's eyes sparkled. "Even better than your carving knife?" Henry laughed. "Much better." Caleb hugged him. "Good night, Pa." Henry closed his eyes for a moment, holding on to the moment like it might float away. "Good night, son." Outside, the stars blinked above the quiet trees. Inside, the cabin glowed warm and full. There were no more storms to fear, no more men on horseback. Just a family, stitched together not by blood but by choice. And sometimes those are the strongest families of all. Not every family is born. Some are found, some are fought for, and some arrive in the middle of a snowstorm when you least expect them. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. Have you ever found family in an unexpected place? What would you fight to protect no matter what the law says? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale from Stories Untold. Because some stories are meant to be felt.